Welcome to Reading the Bible Together, and today we're in Genesis chapter 12, but we really need to go back a little bit to the last part of Genesis chapter 11, because there we hear about Terah, the father of Abraham, then known as Abram, and others. They embark on a family journey, but what I'd like to point out is where they started from, a place called Ur of the Chaldeans. We actually know where that is. You'll find it in modern-day Iraq, of all places, close to the Persian Gulf. Now, Ur was a large city, and the ruins found there today are extensive. So Abram's roots are Iraqi, which makes the animosity of modern-day Iraq towards Abraham's descendants, the Jews, all the more sad. The story tells us that the family went north along the Euphrates River as far as Haran. We know where that is too, modern-day Turkey, close to the northern border of Syria. We're told that the family settled there. Again, this makes the animosity of modern-day Turkey and Syria towards Abraham's descendants, the Jews, all the more sad. And that finally brings us to chapter 12, where God speaks to Abram. A vision, a dream, a voice from the heavens, we're not told, but we are told what God said. Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Now, a couple of things to notice. First of all, Abram is commanded to leave his home country, his fellow countrymen, and his heritage, his father's household. Abram will be starting fresh. Now, this is, as the saying goes, a big ask. But there's a big blessing attached. Abram will be made into a great nation. He is to be the father of an entire people. As such, he will be blessed. His name will be great. Notice this too. God says, and you will be a blessing. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Now, this is Abraham's mandate and the purpose of the people who will arise from him, to be a blessing to all people on earth. Not just to his own people, not just to himself, but to all people on earth. Abram will have not only the favor of God, but a source of protection as well. God says, I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. Again, I'll bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. So we're told Abraham left as the Lord told him. He and his wife Sarai, she's not yet called Sarah, had settled down in Haran for some time, and they had accumulated wealth as well as responsibility for their nephew Lot. More about him later. You can imagine the whole baggage train heading down into Canaan, ancestral land of the descendants of Noah's son Ham. They traveled as far as Shechem. Shechem is how it looks in the Bible. Shechem is how it's pronounced. And we're also told the Canaanites were then in the land. It isn't an empty country. In fact, to travel from Haran down into Canaan to Shem, there's kind of a bottleneck through the mountains of northern Israel, southern Lebanon, which leads you through the ancient city of Laish, now an archaeological site known by the Hebrew name of the city, Dan. Recently uncovered, very recently uncovered, is an astonishing 4,000-year-old massive mud brick arch and gate through which travelers would have to pass to control entrance into the area and, of course, to pay taxes on their goods. It's entirely possible that Abram and his retinue passed right through this very gate. Boy, it's exciting to stand there and think that. Now, it's no small journey from Haran to Shechem, now found smack dab in the middle of the West Bank, part of the city of Nablus. It's about 1,000 kilometers. That's a long way to go for a 75-year-old man. Now, Abram must have been wondering how this populated land could be his, but God reiterated, to your offspring, I will give this land. And to mark this commitment of God, Abram, we are told, built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him, not just spoken to him, but who had appeared to him. Well, still on the move, Abram traveled onward south again to Bethel. And Bethel's only about 10 miles to the north of what would become Jerusalem. Continuing to journey south, Abram left the green pastures of Bethel and continued, we are told, towards the Negev, which is quite a desert area. Abram's truly walking from the northern tip to the southern reaches of what is now Israel, some 500 kilometers north to south. So, what we have in the first half of chapter 12 is the very beginning of the story of the Hebrew people, which is what the rest of the whole Bible is going to be about. The promise of God to make Abraham into a nation which would be a blessing to the whole world. And it's too bad the chapter doesn't end there, because the first thing Abram does upon traversing the length of the land promised to him is to mess up. Unfortunately, there is a second half to chapter 12. Abram leaves the promised land, the land God promised to him and to his descendants. We're told there was a famine. Rather than head back up north to the more fertile parts of the country, rather than place his trust in God, Abram leaves Canaan altogether and heads to Egypt, a story which will repeat itself later on in Genesis in the Joseph saga, and of course in the Jesus life story in the New Testament as well. But this story of Abraham in Egypt is not quite so noble. They're about to cross the border, and Abram says to his wife, "I know what a beautiful woman you are." So far, so good. "When the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'Oh, this is his wife,' and then they will kill me, but let you live. Say you're my sister, so that I will be treated well for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you." Now, there's just no way to put a good spin on this. Abram is obviously a work in progress. There's a lot of rough edges still to work out. You might have noticed that when we're introduced to Abram, we're not told, as in the case of Noah, that he's a righteous man, and that's why God chose him. We're simply told that God spoke to him. And what's about to happen, well, is far from righteous. When Abram came to Egypt, we read, the Egyptians saw that Sarai was a very beautiful woman. And when Pharaoh's officials saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and she was taken into his palace, basically into his harem. He treated Abram well for her sake, and Abram acquired sheep and cattle, male and female donkeys, male and female servants, and camels. Camels is significant because there's no camels in Israel or Mesopotamia. They all come from the area of Egypt. Now, you simply can't paint a pretty picture from this event. The great Jewish teacher Nachmanides, 800 years ago, called it as it was. He said, well, this is sin. Both the failure to trust God to sustain them, resulting in leaving Canaan in the first place, and then the failure to trust God to protect Sarai, leading her to being placed in the harem. These things are sin. And Nachmanides taught that the eventual enslavement of the people in Egypt, which we read about at the beginning of Exodus, came about as an echo of this event. And perhaps even, said Nachmanides, the Jews being expulsed from their homeland by the Romans, and in Nachmanides' time still not permitted to return. Well, it is a shameful story, this of Abram and Sarai and the Pharaoh, no less because Abram profited from it. We're told at the beginning of chapter 13 that he'd become very wealthy in livestock, silver, and gold. We perhaps would have been happier with the story if, as a result, Abram lost all of his wealth. But no, he got rich on it. Again, what are we to make of all this? He's a work in progress, Abram. He will again evidence questionable morality in later chapters. He's not perfect. Neither is Sarai. We'll see in later chapters how her jealousy splits the family irrevocably in two. Now, remember that these stories are set long in advance of the Ten Commandments or any other formal behavioral code. Oh, that's no excuse, because no less than the Pharaoh convicted Abram of wrongdoing in this instance, doubtless because of the serious diseases the Lord inflicted on Pharaoh's household, a foretaste perhaps of the plagues of Exodus. So we like to find a moral to the story. What's the moral of this story? Well, Moral is maybe an unfortunate choice of words in this amoral action. Let's instead say, what's the lesson of this story? And the lesson is God chooses people that we don't expect to fulfill his purpose. People like us. God's people may not be perfect, but God makes use of us anyway. What Abram demonstrated was obedience to God's directive. When God said go, he went. That's Abram's great attribute. His failing was sometimes going even when God didn't say to go. That's most often our failing too. Brace yourself for more struggles ahead, but as you read these chapters, take note of the astonishing patience of God, of the unlikely and unexpected twists and turns in the story, and of how, despite often the best and worst attempts of his people, God is going to bring his purposes through to fruition. And that means hope for us all. Sometimes when people say, oh, the Bible is just full of all of these saintly and holy characters, I always say, have you read it? Well, we'll see you next time for chapter 13.